Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they don't know why they started. Every morning, millions wake up tired, not from work, but from working without meaning. They chase goals they didn't choose, climb ladders leaning against the wrong walls, and call it success while something inside quietly disappears. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you don't know your why, you become vulnerable to burnout, to manipulation, to quitting when things get hard. Your why is not your job, it's not your title, it's not your paycheck. Your why is the reason you move forward when the applause stops. It's what gives clarity in chaos and courage in uncertainty. Organizations with a clear why don't beg for loyalty, they inspire it. Leaders with a clear why don't demand trust, they earn it. People with a clear why don't wait for motivation, they create momentum. This isn't about inspiration. This is about survival in a world that's constantly trying to distract you from who you are. If you don't define your why, someone else will, and they'll use it for their agenda, not yours. So the real question isn't what you do, it's not how you do it. The question that changes everything is, why does it matter? Especially when it's hard. Purpose is not something you earn after success. It is the foundation that makes success sustainable. When a man wakes up without a clear reason for why he is doing what he does, his mind begins to drift toward shortcuts, distractions, and silent frustration. From a psychological perspective, men are wired to pursue progress, to feel useful, to know that their effort is contributing to something larger than themselves. When that sense of purpose is missing, stress doesn't just appear, it accumulates, often expressed as anger, withdrawal, or a quiet sense of failure that's difficult to name. Men without purpose don't stop working. They stop believing in the work. They may still show up, provide, and perform, but internally, they feel replaceable and disconnected. This is where burnout hides, not in exhaustion, but in meaninglessness. Women often see this before men do. They notice when a man loses direction, when his confidence erodes, when his presence becomes heavier instead of grounded, because purpose affects how a man listens, leads, and emotionally shows up. Purpose changes how men handle pressure because it reframes struggle as necessary rather than personal. When a man knows why he is enduring discomfort, he doesn't interpret difficulty as a threat to his identity. Instead, it becomes evidence that what he is doing matters. From a woman's perspective, this clarity is not just attractive, it's stabilizing. A man with purpose doesn't need constant validation because his worth isn't negotiated through approval. Purpose also protects men from chasing external definitions of success that were never designed for them. Status, money, and recognition can motivate behavior, but they cannot sustain identity. Women often sense when a man is driven by fear of inadequacy rather than commitment to meaning, because fear creates urgency without direction, and ambition without alignment inevitably collapses under pressure. When purpose is present, men don't ask for permission to become who they are meant to be. They become calmer in decision-making, firmer in boundaries, and more intentional in relationships. From both a male and female psychological lens, purpose is not an optional upgrade to life. It is the operating system that determines whether strength becomes service or self-destruction. Clarity of purpose changes how a man approaches risk because fear loses its authority when meaning takes its place. When a man knows why he is moving forward, hesitation stops being about self-doubt and becomes a calculation of commitment. Psychologically, men are more willing to endure uncertainty when they can attach it to a reason that feels personal and necessary, and that clarity transforms courage from a personality trait into a practiced behavior. A clear why rewires how men experience failure, shifting it from a verdict on identity to feedback on direction. Without purpose, setbacks feel like proof that a man is not enough, which triggers defensiveness or withdrawal. With purpose, the same setbacks are interpreted as part of the process, something to be learned from rather than avoided. Women often recognize this shift first, noticing when a man stops taking obstacles personally and starts responding to them with calm persistence instead of emotional shutdown. Bravery emerges when the mind no longer needs certainty to move forward. Men with a defined why don't wait until conditions are perfect, because perfection is no longer the goal. Progress becomes the objective, and action becomes a form of alignment rather than a test of worth. From a woman's perspective, this kind of bravery feels grounded rather than reckless, because it is driven by intention instead of ego. When the why is clear, effort stops feeling like exposure and starts feeling like expression. Men no longer fear being seen trying, failing, or learning because their actions are anchored to something meaningful. This reduces the pressure to perform masculinity through control or dominance and replaces it with confidence rooted in direction. Women often respond to this shift with trust, because clarity of purpose creates predictability in values even when outcomes are uncertain. Courage sustained by purpose also changes how men lead and relate, because decisions are no longer made to protect image but to honor intention. This allows men to make harder choices, You know without guilt and move forward even when approval is absent, as bravery becomes the natural consequence of knowing exactly why the path is worth walking. Motivation fades quickly when it isn't anchored to meaning, because the human mind can't run on energy alone. Men often begin with intensity, driven by excitement, competition, or external pressure, but without a deeper reason. That drive burns hot and fast. Psychologically, men are conditioned to push through discomfort, yet when there's no clear why, effort feels transactional rather than purposeful, making consistency almost impossible. Without a why, men rely on mood to determine momentum. On good days, they feel unstoppable. On hard days, everything feels heavy and optional. This inconsistency isn't laziness, it's disorientation. Women often observe this cycle closely, noticing how a man's motivation rises and falls with praise, results, or reassurance. When motivation depends on external validation, it becomes fragile, and pressure exposes the absence of internal grounding. A clear why turns discipline into identity rather than obligation. When men understand why something matters, action stops feeling like self-negotiation. They no longer ask, "Do I feel like it today?" Because the decision has already been made at a deeper level. From a psychological standpoint, this reduces mental fatigue, because clarity eliminates constant internal debate. Women experience this as reliability, because consistency signals commitment, not just ambition. Men without a why often confuse intensity for progress. They start strong, talk big, and move fast, but direction keeps shifting, which leads to frustration and self-doubt. Women sense this instability, not in words but in behavior, as goals change and promises weaken. Motivation built on emotion struggles to survive resistance, while motivation built on meaning grows stronger under it. When purpose is missing, men search for motivation in rewards, approval, or urgency, but those forces expire quickly. A why doesn't make the work easier, it makes the effort non-negotiable, allowing men to keep moving long after motivation would have disappeared. People may notice what a man does, but they commit to why he does it. Actions can impress in the short term, but meaning creates trust, and trust is what sustains influence. From a psychological perspective, men often feel pressure to prove value through results, achievements, or control, yet those signals rarely inspire loyalty on their own. When meaning is absent, actions feel transactional, and people engage only as long as the reward remains. Men who operate without clear meaning often rely on authority, volume, or performance to be followed. This creates compliance, not commitment. Women tend to sense this distinction quickly because emotional intelligence picks up on intention beneath behavior. When a man's actions are driven by ego or fear, people respond cautiously. When those same actions are guided by purpose, they invite belief rather than resistance. Meaning gives coherence to behavior, allowing others to predict values even when outcomes change. A man with a clear why doesn't need to explain every decision because his choices align with a consistent internal compass. Psychologically, this consistency reduces anxiety in those around him, particularly for women who often seek emotional safety through reliability of values rather than intensity of effort. When meaning is present, leadership becomes relational rather than positional. Men stop trying to be followed and start focusing on serving something larger than themselves. This shift alters how men listen, how they respond under pressure, and how they treat disagreement. Women often respond to this with openness because meaning-driven leadership creates space for trust rather than competition. Actions without meaning can be copied, but meaning creates belonging. Men who lead with purpose attract people who believe what they believe, not just those who benefit from the outcome. From both male and female psychological lenses, this is what transforms influence from something demanded into something freely given, rooted in shared values rather than enforced behavior. Pressure exposes what a man is anchored to when everything around him becomes uncertain. When challenges appear without warning, the mind looks for direction before it looks for relief. Men without a clear why experience pressure as chaos because there is no internal framework to organize the stress. Psychologically, this often triggers fight or flight responses, expressed as control, aggression, or emotional withdrawal, while the real issue is not the pressure itself, but the absence of meaning to guide it. A clear why converts pressure from a threat into a signal for focus. When a man understands what he stands for, stress stops scattering his attention and starts narrowing it. Instead of asking how to escape discomfort, he asks what matters most right now. Women often recognize this shift quick. Because pressure no longer makes him unpredictable, it makes him decisive. Direction replaces reactivity, creating emotional stability even when circumstances remain intense. Men are biologically and socially conditioned to carry weight, but without direction, weight becomes burden. Purpose acts as a psychological compass, allowing men to distribute effort instead of absorbing everything at once. This is where pressure becomes productive rather than destructive. From a woman's perspective, a man with direction under stress feels grounded rather than volatile because his responses are guided by values instead of impulse. When the why is clear, pressure sharpens identity rather than eroding it. Men no longer interpret stress as evidence of inadequacy, but as confirmation that they are engaged in something meaningful. This reduces the need to prove strength through dominance or silence. Women often feel safer around men who can sit with pressure without collapsing or lashing out, because emotional regulation becomes a byproduct of purpose. Direction also allows men to say no under pressure, which is a form of strength often misunderstood. Without a why, men overcommit, overextend, and overpromise in an attempt to maintain control or approval. With a why, boundaries become clearer and choices become intentional. Women experience this not as distance, but as respect. Because clarity prevents resentment from building unnoticed. Pressure never disappears, but its impact is determined by alignment. When effort is aimed at something meaningful, stress becomes organized, decisions become simpler, and energy is conserved for what truly matters. From both male and female psychological perspectives, direction doesn't remove difficulty. It gives difficulty a place to go. Men who know their why stop waiting for external approval because clarity replaces hesitation. When purpose is undefined, men often look outward for permission in the form of validation, consensus, or authority. Psychologically, this dependence creates delay and self-doubt. Not because men lack ability, but because uncertainty about meaning makes every decision feel risky. Without a clear why, action feels like exposure, and inaction feels safer. A defined why strengthens internal authority, allowing men to move without needing reassurance. Once the reason is clear, the fear of being misunderstood loses its grip. Men begin to act from alignment rather than comparison, and this reduces the pressure to justify every choice. Women often sense this shift as confidence without arrogance, because decisions are made calmly rather than defensively. Permission-seeking is often a symptom of misalignment rather than insecurity. Men hesitate when they are unsure whether their actions reflect who they truly are. Purpose eliminates this hesitation by creating a standard that exists independent of opinion. From a psychological standpoint, this frees cognitive energy that would otherwise be spent on overthinking. Women experience this as emotional steadiness, because clarity produces consistency even when circumstances change. When men know their why, they stop negotiating their values under pressure. This changes how they handle disagreement, criticism, and resistance. Instead of escalating or withdrawing, they remain grounded, because opposition no longer threatens identity. Women often feel safer expressing honesty around men like this because boundaries are firm but not rigid, and strength is expressed through restraint rather than control. Purpose-driven men also stop asking for permission to outgrow old roles. They are willing to evolve, pivot, or walk away when something no longer aligns, even if it disappoints others. This is not rebellion, it is responsibility. From a woman's perspective, this kind of growth feels trustworthy because change is guided by principle rather than impulse. Knowing why also changes how men relate to power, authority, and tradition. They respect structure without being trapped by it, and they question rules without becoming hostile. Psychologically, this creates autonomy without isolation. Women often recognize this balance as maturity, because independence is paired with consideration rather than detachment. When purpose is clear, men move with quiet certainty rather than loud permission. Decisions are made from conviction, not reaction, and progress becomes intentional instead of delayed by fear of disapproval.